But really, anyways, what about Cain himself? Even though the reference in Genesis is a bit obscured as to its full meaning, how can I identify his mark as to being the mark of the beast? After all, the meaning of his mark was specific to a point. Genesis 4:14 through 15. Behold, you have driven me out this day from the face of the earth, and from your face shall I be hid. And I shall be a fugitive and a vagabond in the earth, and it shall come to pass that everyone that finds me shall slay me. The Lord said to him, Therefore whosoever slays Cain, vengeance shall be taken on him sevenfold. And the Lord set a mark upon Cain, lest any finding him should kill him. As to what that mark was, there has been many interpretations. Let's go to John Gill's exposition of the Bible, about which there is a variety of sentiments. Some say it was a horn in his forehead, others a leprosy in his face, others a wild ghastly look, others a shaking and a trembling in all his limbs. Others say that there was an earthquake wherever he stepped. You see how far these things can go? Others will have it that the dog which guarded Abel's flock was given him to accompany him in his travels, by which sign it might be known that he was not to be attacked, or to direct him from taking any dangerous road. Some say it was a letter imprinted right on his forehead, either taken out of the great and glorious name of God, as the Targum of Jonathan says, or out of his own name, as Jarchi says. Others, the mark or sign of the covenant of circumcision. Now, I really do not think, however, that we have to be so literal in our interpretation of this. One of the strengths of my arguments is the usage of the mark in the book letter of Revelation, that is more likely to be in the forehead than on the forehead, as we're going to see in much better detail in my promised upcoming chapter in this book, which isn't exclusively on that topic, but is on some natural interpretations of Revelation. You're going to find that very interesting, by the way. Look, we can be marked without having to have any physical outward signs. That is, unless it's outwardly in how we act and speak, which is actually some ways as to how I'm even interpreting this. Even Peter, despite his efforts, was betrayed to a group of people by the way he spoke and conducted his speech, for it was a part of him. Let's see that, Matthew 26:73. And after a while came unto him they that stood by, and they said to Peter, Surely you also are one of them, for your speech bewrayeth thee, i.e., makes you known, J.P. Green translation as it says. Now, every person's past affects whom they become, of course, and it's hard to escape that. And though I believe that the mark which Cain received was he being known as a criminal in God's eyes, his mark also held another special purpose, a keeping of killing hands off from him. This could simply mean that whomever Cain met, and despite he being a known criminal, marked, known, that God simply laid it on other people's hearts not to slay him. Be that as it may, my answers may not be satisfactory as of yet. But as we're going to see what that mark of the beast truly is a little bit later on, it may all line up for the reader, or in this case the listener, quite nicely. One may want to come back to this explanatory note after reading further on. Also, and as an added P.S., that mark was to stay on both his natural descendants and on those who followed the patterns of Cain's ways, even if they weren't natural descendants of his, as I'm fixing to discuss in the next subnote. However, as far as folks not striking them down like Cain, that was one part of the deal that did not remain on the children, his children's children, or on his children's children's children, etc. All right, now let's go to a subnote here that when I mentioned that Cain was a murderer. I really don't think it's a coincidence that Cain is the first recorded murderer and liar in the Bible, and that Jesus said of the devil, John 8:44, you are of your father the devil. and the lust of your father you will do. He was a murderer from the beginning, and he abode not in the truth, because there's no truth in him. When he speaks a lie, he speaks of his own, for he's a liar and the father of it. Yes, I'm seeing a direct connection with the devil here and of Cain. As I speak on in the main part of the book, Cain became the father of the unrighteous lineage. And I don't think that lineage had stopped with the flood of Noah. That unrighteous line went on through Jesus' day and on into our own day. People may not be of the actual blood lineage of Cain, but they are very much his children when they copy his carnal evil patterns. You know, Cain being an example or a type and shadow of a devilish man. Again, being the first murderer and liar in history, he became the father of all murderers and liars. This thought works similarly with Abraham being the father of many nations, for not all of us are of his natural blood's lineage, but we can call him our father if we share in his faith. Romans 4:16, therefore it is of faith that it might be by grace, to the end the promise might be sure to all the seed, not to that only which is of the law, but to that also which is of the faith of Abraham, who is the father of us all, including the Roman non-Jews. Galatians 3:7, know ye therefore that they which are of the faith, they the same are the children of Abraham. Galatians 3:29, if you be Christ, then are you Abraham's seed and heirs according to the promise. In conclusion, all those who follow after the patterns of Cain, who again is the father of all murderers and liars, you know, the devil of Jesus' example in John 8:44, they all are Cain's children indeed. But no, Cain is not still alive as if he's the literal devil of church tradition, but he is alive in the actions and motions of people who follow his pattern. And too, he being the true son of Adam, Adam being the first man to actually fall in sin back in the garden, and having his father's sinful nature also, Cain is, once again, a natural example as to being a son of Adam. The same as we today, when we're living a sinning life, are the sons of Adam also, and we're literally his children in the natural anyway, as we have already seen him being the first human on the earth, and a subnote for chapter 4 in here in this book, of which subnote was called Genesis 1:27, so God created man, Adam, as well as we being the son of Adam in the spiritual sense also, of which when we consider ourselves again in the spiritual sense as to being the children of Adam. All of this breaks off into types and shadows, along with figurative insights from Paul's own writings and teachings, such as this, 1 Corinthians 15:22a, in Adam all die. Romans 5:12, wherefore as by one man, first man Adam from Genesis, sin entered into the world, and death by sin. And so death passed upon all men, for that all have sinned. Insinuating that if we follow after the ways of first man Adam, we'll truly be his son only and not a son of God, and will die the same spiritual death that he had died also. That is, being dead to God before ever reaching the grave of eternal death. Now, this thought, of course, includes all females, too, who are of the same carnal opinions, being the daughters of Cain and Adam. However, in our scriptural examples from the book of Genesis, these daughters of men were the actual blood descendants of Cain, opposite, no doubt, to the sons of God, who were the descendants of Seth, the righteous brother who took Abel's place as to being the man who would birth a righteous lineage in the earth. Genesis 4:25, Adam knew his wife again. She bare a son, called his name Seth. For God, says she, has appointed me another righteous seed for a righteous lineage instead of Abel, whom Cain slew. All right, our next subnote is called visible to other people. The only way that this mark can become visible to other people is really in an indirect way, such as through a person's false character, their false speech, their false actions. Therefore, if all that I've been saying concerning this mark be true, then we should definitely know that such a mark becomes visible when people start demonstrating bitter or evil actions, and when bitter and evil speech proceeds from their mouths. Therefore, the mark becomes extremely visible or obvious toward those who have gifts of discernment, especially for sour personalities are hidden behind serpent charm. For some have much serpent wisdom to be seen, like a snake that hides in the grass. Matthew 10:16. Behold, I send you forth as sheep in the midst of wolves. Be you therefore wise as serpents, but harmless as doves. Hebrews 5:14. But strong meat belongs to them that are of full age, even those who by reason of use have their senses exercised to discern both good and evil.